Thank you. It is so exciting to be here. I am Yale class of '99, and I have to admit that when I was a student here, 15 plus odd years ago, sitting on that side of the classroom, I never thought there was a chance in the world that they would ever let me up here on this side of the room. But it is an honor and a pleasure, so thank you to Robbie for inviting me. Now, coming back to campus always brings back memories, and today is no exception. In fact, how many of you remember your first cell phone? Well, I do. This is it. A handy Ericsson flip phone, pretty snazzy. I did not have it here on campus at Yale, but I did get it immediately upon graduation. In fact, my first employer gave that to me along with a cherished BlackBerry. And while it was much easier for me to part with the flip phone than it was the BlackBerry, they're both now out of my life. And things have actually changed materially. And this is evidenced by my youngest daughter, Amelie. She's 5. She was exposed to an iPhone at an age earlier than I care to admit in a public forum, in all honesty. But first came the iPhone, then came the iPad, and by the time she was old enough to see over my desk to my computer, she simply called it an iPuter. And that's the way it's been in our family ever since. iPhone, iPad, iPuter. Take note, Apple. This is a changing dynamic. And she is a digital native, which is a little bit what I'm here to chat with you all about. But you know what they say, never do market research on yourself. So let's look at some research. 38% of infants and toddlers have used a mobile device by the time they are 2. That number surges to 72% by the time children are 8 years old. Now, if these percentages don't surprise you, then perhaps the amount of time they use with media will. 168 more hours on media than in school for 5 to 8 years olds. That's more hours on media than in school. I actually told this to a friend of mine over dinner, and he flat out didn't believe me, didn't think the math penciled. So out we came with the pen and the napkin, and we did some napkin math, and it is in fact possible. Now, I do believe that he had forgotten about summers and weekends, which makes this even more possible, but we're not the only ones who did the math. Others have as well, and while this is somewhat dated, it does show, I think, an increasing trend. Anywhere between 4 hours, if you're looking, back when I graduated, to 7 hours in 2009 of media a day for kids under the age of 18. So why do we care? Well, as a parent, I certainly care. As an educator, I care. And as a marketer, I care. Just by a show of hands, so I know who I'm chatting with, who here is a parent, educator, marketer? Okay. And so I think we're obligated to ask the question, what is the impact? Well, we're not the only ones. Any quick Google search will tell you that a lot of people are talking about this topic. UK Telegraph calls it the Facebook generation, a national attention deficit disorder, a disorder. Can't concentrate in the classroom anymore. That school up north that we've been referring to all day, along with the New York Times, a generation whose brains are wired differently. They actually go on to say that media today might be so captivating that reality becomes boring. But what if I posit to you that not all screens are created equal? In fact, all screens are not created equal, and we can't lump all media into a fancy number or percentage. In fact, it is much more about the way how we use media than how much we use it. And so we at Istation looked at the impact of media on attention, memory, and motivation. And these three hinge together. We all know if we aren't catching anyone's attention, we haven't even started. So that's a prerequisite, necessary but not sufficient. If you're not paying attention, very low chance that you're going to be activating your working memory and certainly not your long-term memory. And of course, you need to have retained something if you're ever going to be able to act on that information. So we'll go through each of these in turn, starting with attention. Meet Kevin. Kevin is a third grader, a real child. His name and image have been disguised here for privacy reasons, but this is very much a true case study. And he's at the age in school where he needs to go from reading to learn, learning to read to reading to learn. He needs to go from learning to read to reading to learn. And because he has had trouble with reading, he's also now stumbling in other subject matters. And so it's showing up across all of his grades and certainly in his motivation level. We exposed him to a digital interactive curriculum, highly animated, highly interactive, and best of all, adaptive. So if there was a particular area that he was struggling with, whether it be vocabulary, spelling, or something more conceptual like cause and effect, the program would pause there and give him more examples and more opportunities to engage in various ways. Now this is a little bit about Kevin after several months on the interactive program.
An avid reader at all. And because of Istation, now loves to read. And when you can give a kid the love of reading, you've opened the world to them, and they're learning. And to me, that's the gift. That's the gift of an education.
Okay, so what do we know about attention? Well, it's fairly simple. It's merely defined as your degree of focus. And that degree of focus needs to be strong enough to override all of the external forces, whether that be a fire truck going by, the air conditioning being too cold, or a nosy neighbor. But it also needs to be strong enough to override all of the internal subconscious thoughts. Everything from being hungry to thinking about the baseball game that afternoon, or being worried about something that happened the day before. And because every individual is unique and every individual's circumstances are unique, that degree of focus, how strong that needs to be, is going to vary depending on the individual. Now, it did not take the information age to come up with this framework or way of thinking. In fact, along with everything we've been talking about all day in our previous sessions, Shakespeare said in Hamlet, "The play's the thing wherein I'll catch the conscience of the king." Maria Montessori, a big fan of her work, and my children have certainly benefited from her wisdom. While I have no idea what she would think of the digital age, I do know she was very much against the one-sided lecture. Yes, I understand that is exactly what I'm doing right now. And she would disapprove wholeheartedly. And also very much against the rote lecture and the rote memorization. But she did say, if you're testing new pedagogical methods, one test, surely, of the correctness of it is the happiness of the child. If a child is enjoying themselves, if they're engaged in the activity, then of course they'll be far more receptive to learning. And that's not just true for students, that's true for everybody. If we're enjoying ourselves, we're certainly going to be far more likely to be paying attention. Mr. Rogers, thank you for the little tidbit earlier today. It was a nice segue to what I had planned on Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. A lot of people don't know this about him, but he actually went into television because he hated it so. He thought there was a lot of mechanical junk, frankly, on television, but knew it was a powerful medium and that there was a better way to use it to actually be of nurture. Now, one of Istation's founders is known throughout the office as saying, especially to our curriculum leads who are very dedicated, incredibly talented, your carefully crafted content is useless if no one is paying attention to it. And I think as parents, that's absolutely true. It doesn't matter how thoughtful our advice is. If our kids aren't paying attention, it doesn't matter. As educators, we can have the best theorem in the world, but if we can't get the kids to pay attention, the students to pay attention, it's worthless. And same with marketers. We could have the best product in the world, but if no one is sitting up and listening, we haven't done our job. But here's the thing with attention. If all we've done is get people to sit up and listen, we haven't done much, and we certainly have not done enough. We need to get people to memory. They need to instill these messages in their memory, whether it be working memory or long-term memory. So let's take a little bit of look at memory, and I'll introduce you here to Rosa. Now, Rosa is a dyslexic child, and the reason I bring up dyslexia is because many times the cause of dyslexia is thought to actually be a low working memory. And what I mean by that is, take, for example, the word cat, k-at. Many times somebody struggling with dyslexia can't maintain the k while they're processing the at. So if you can actually increase their working memory, the k-at cat can hang together. And so Rosa also was introduced to an interactive adaptive curriculum, and the really important thing here is the adaptive pacing of it. And so while other children may have been able to go faster through certain sessions or lessons, this one slowed down to fit her needs. And this is a little bit about Rosa after several months on the program.
In 4th grade that I work with, I'm also a dyslexic teacher, and she's in my room, and it's been fun to watch her. She started off on tier 3 and really struggling with some basic skills, and I looked today and she has moved up to yellow, so it's very exciting to see that growth, especially for this sweet little girl who's a hard worker and wants to do well, and is very self-motivated. So it's so fun she'll be excited, she'll come in and she'll see her growth, and we can share that celebration, and then it just inspires her to continue working hard and moving up and moving from tier 3 to tier 2 and eventually to tier 1.
Now, what can we take away from that? Well, one thing in particular, a learner must be allowed to control the rate of information. And so any one-sided monologue may not be effective for everyone. And one way I'll demonstrate this is a strategy I call chunk it or chuck it. I will give you a random 10 digits and 8 digits, give you a couple seconds to memorize those. Okay, now I can chunk it for you. And you can see already how much easier it will be for you to retain this information. This happens broadly. The more you think about it, the more you see it, whether it be chapters in books, the way a store is organized, and even in music. And along with the chunking it strategy, let me know if you remember this one. 8, 6, 7, 5, 3, 0, 9. There you go. All right. And so music also is an interesting way for the brain to chunk information. E flat is a classic example. Multiple notes, but actually symbolically held through the symbol and the name of E flat, and also held as a tone in our brain. Okay, so that's attention and memory. But again, we've got people to pay attention. Maybe they've retained 1 or 2 things. But honestly, if we're not influencing behavior, what impact have we really got? And that brings me back to the original question of what is the impact here? And so what is the effect of all this media, so many couch potatoes and other things that feel unresponsive really on motivation? And I have one more case study for you. This is Alexis. It's the last one, I promise. But Alexis is a very talented child, no known learning disabilities at all, but highly unmotivated, and was not putting the time or effort into her homework or her tests, which were impacting her grades and, frankly, her opportunities. Again, in a digital adaptive environment, highly animated, game-based environment, she could accelerate or work at the pace that best suited her needs. And so let's see about Alexis again several months into the program.
Was just not turning in that reading log that we were talking about, not really excited about reading, not doing anything. And as I started to look at the minutes that they had been on and their assessments when I do those, I'm like, is this the same child? She's really excited about reading now, and it has made a terrific difference. And I think one of the major differences that I see is that enthusiasm and that love for reading.
Okay. Takeaway, knowledge is power, but enthusiasm pulls the switch. People need to be having fun and enjoying it, and I think most of all feeling that their actions have consequence or are of material consequence, that they themselves are having impact, not simply being impacted. And I think this is more of an aside, but I think really fascinating when it comes to a digital learning environment. For most children, frankly, for most people, the biggest fear is in making a mistake in front of our peers. Now, what a digital one-on-one environment allows a person to do is fail both privately, but fail knowingly. And being able to fail privately and knowingly can be a key to unlocking motivation and some risk-taking in students and adults alike. So let's bring it all together. I've told you a little bit about what can happen if media is used in its most powerful format, but why? Why does it work? What makes it so different from maybe traditional methods or reality as we know it? Well, I will use my own lecture as an example versus some interactive content. Now, this is a sample from one of our math programs.
Johnny is the man. Always being good with numbers. Sticks an angel, help him figure it out. Every kind of road he can solve. When there is math involved, Johnny and his team always find the answer.
I don't know about you, but that's not how I learned math growing up. But what's the difference? So let's look at my lecture. One to many, I have to solve for the average. I have no choice. Interactive content can be completely personalized on a one-to-one level. Similarly, I'm up here controlling the speed, whereas in an interactive medium, the user, often by the decisions they're making throughout, can control the speed. A corollary to that are the choice points. Here, you have very few choice points. You could get up and leave. Trust me, I would not be offended. I perfectly understand. But in interactive content, a user has multiple choice points, which means if you wanted to dive deeper on one of the case studies or fast forward to the end because you've heard all this already, that would be your decision. And it would be a decision that has a material consequence on your experience. Similarly, for me right now, I have no idea about your progress. If you're retaining any of this, if you're interested in it at all, I'm guessing. I see some good faces. I see people looking and making eye contact, so that's great, but inferred. Whereas here, not only is progress monitored, but it can be rewarded, whether that be retweets on Twitter or likes on Facebook or gold stars, digital gold stars. All of those are possibilities in a digital environment. And lastly, your reward, if there are any from being here today, are intrinsic. Only you really will know them. Whereas again, the rewards in a digital environment can be both intrinsic because you are learning, but they can also be extrinsic, where you share the winner of the game, you get points and awards, you get, as we all know through the sessions we just had on gaming, multiple different things that can come your way based on the decisions and the actions that you have taken. And we're not alone necessarily in these findings, just in contrast to some of the articles I showed in the beginning of the presentation. The Atlantic profiled a study in Nature magazine. It was in the study they had featured was entitled "Video Gaming Enhances Cognitive Skills That Decline with Age, Game Changer." And what the article was about was how digital social media was so distracting, nobody could pay attention anymore. If you remember that first quote, kids can't pay attention in the classroom anymore. And with a little bit of tongue-in-cheek, they said, why is it so hard for us to believe that an immersive, fun video game wouldn't help the war on disruption? If you think about that degree of focus, what could be more compelling and overriding external and internal distractions than something that is completely captivating? Now, I've shared with you a number of case studies, but I know we're a research-based audience, so I also wanted to share with you some of our more quantitative findings. So basically, for first through fifth graders who used Istation for 400 minutes or more versus a control of students who did not, they saw 84% greater growth in reading scores. For 6th through 8th grade, that growth was 67%. And we also have a Spanish curriculum, which is not English as a second language, but truly Spanish, Spanish reading and writing. And that growth, 51% growth in scores and performance versus non-users. So we're convinced that this is a path forward. We are certainly in no way wanting to supplant the teacher. The teacher is an integral component to everything that has to do with this digital curriculum. And there are lots of teacher-led lessons that come along with it. But it is certainly an eye into the future that I personally am compassionate about. And I think bringing it back to whether you are a parent or an educator or a marketer, I hope I've caught your attention. I hope that you have retained one or two nuggets. But more than anything, when it comes to motivation and behavioral change, I hope the next time you see an app or exposed to some media or digital content, or frankly even a marketing ad, or you're thinking about putting out some marketing material, ask yourself 3 questions. These are an oversimplification, but they're a good test. 1, is it personalized? 2, does the audience, my audience, get to make any choice points of consequence in the experience? And 3rd, are those decisions rewarded in any way? If the answer to those 3 is yes, I would say that is a much more quality experience than some of the other apps or experiences that you can have out there. And with that, I will take questions. Oh, there's one. Okay.
Hi. So as you worked with these kids and you said that, there was one kid who hated reading, but then they used this interactive method and then they loved reading. Did you find that in order to maintain their attention, they would have to continue sourcing from these digital sources, or they now built up this enjoyment that they could read books and they would find that just as captivating?
Yeah, I think we have seen, because it affects things across the spectrum of motivation and things like that, that it does have spillover effects. We don't have any quantitative research on that, but certainly anecdotal evidence would suggest that the tide rises overall.
There was a large-scale study done by, I think it's information system professors. They found that introduce a broadband internet into the classroom in middle school, and that lowered the school's GPA, all the students. And they found that if the kids doing YouTube in class hurt the most. So can you comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to the primary thesis of not all content is created equal. Just because you're connected to the internet does not by any means predict or suggest that you will see educational gains, attention gains, motivation gains at all. It really comes down to the quality of the content on the broadband or the internet or the YouTube and what it is they're looking at.
So last question up here.
Okay, great.
I don't want to make a gigantic leap here. I'm a book lover. I love the tactile. But I think what you're pointing me toward is that if you took a similar curricula content and put it on a digital platform, you're almost automatically catching the attention of this age group. Is that where you're leading us toward?
I think it's a bit of an oversimplification. I think if we stopped at attention, we'd be missing 95% of the battle. There are lots of attention-getting things. I could take off my dress and that would get people's attention, but it wouldn't necessarily make the world a better place. And so it's not about just grabbing the kids' attention. It's also when they're in that environment, helping them to learn and retain the information. And there's some things, not just because of music and cartoons, that help people learn. It's really about them being able to read at their own pace and go back and that sort of thing. Yeah.
A second half to that, you talked about rewards and immediate rewards. that's leading us toward almost a scoreboard, almost instant feedback. Is that where you're leading us toward?
There is definitely, I think, value in instant feedback. And even back when I was in school, the teachers who graded the papers overnight and got you feedback the very next day saw much better results than the teachers who waited a week. And so absolutely instant feedback, both for teachers and for students, I think is highly correlated to performance.
Thank you. You've given me some good ideas. Thank you.
Is that time? Okay. Thank you so much. It was fun.